Good afternoon to you. Mark Sutt with HurricaneTrack.com. It is Monday, the first day of August, 2022, and it's time for the Hurricane Outlook and Discussion, the nice in-depth, well, hopefully it's nice, hopefully you like it, but it's definitely in-depth, a good long look at what's going on in the tropics, some of my thoughts and observations on things, and then a few odds and ends related to the weather, the monsoon in this case, at the end of today's update. Also have a new set, moved into a different room in the home office here in my house in Wilmington, North Carolina. I've got a nice big room now to use. Used to be my son's room, but he has moved out, going into college, studying to be a paramedic, and as such, I've got his big room. It used to be the media room. That's what the room was designated as when we built the house. He used it as his bedroom, and now it's my office. So I've got a lot of space to work on things, lots of projects ongoing, a music production area over to my left. Very excited about it. So good to be back. I was traveling last week to the desert Southwest, and I'm back in the office today. And it's perfect because here we are, first day of August, and you know what that means, as the graphic there says, the headline and the overall thumbnail here that Kari put together for us. You are here, but where are we going from here? I'll try to answer that question in today's update. All right? So as the thumb showed, the title card, as it were, this is where we are, August 1st. On the graph of tropical storms and hurricanes and just hurricanes, we're still well before the ramp up. And it's interesting because statistically speaking, activity drops off just a little bit until about the 20th of August. And then bam, it skyrockets up here until around September 10th, plus or minus a couple of days. This is the peak. And we have a long way to go between now and then. And then it's a pretty rapid drop down, but still, even into mid-October, the activity is still very high overall. So just don't forget that word. It's really important. I know there's a lot of people just kind of like, where's these hurricanes we've been talking about and that have been forecast to come? Again, not that anybody is hoping for death and destruction and the misery that they bring. I don't think anybody in their right mind would do that. But we do have this fascination of tracking them for various reasons, whether we are very anxious about them. We just have, some of our followers are not even near the coast. You know, people from all over the world track these things. They're a very mysterious and interesting part of nature. And when the season is forecast to be as busy as this one has been forecast to be, and they don't happen, you start to wonder, what's going on? And I still think a very big part of it is climatology. And we do have to acknowledge that July was practically dead. We had Colin, a very, very short-lived, non-tropical origin storm. In other words, it didn't come from one of these deep tropical waves that moves across the Atlantic and develops over a few days. It was off of an old mesoscale convective complex, a piece of energy that came off of North America. So it almost doesn't even count. It does, but it doesn't. So July was, for all intents and purposes, absolutely dead. A very common thing. Just to remind you, 2004, which ended up as a very destructive and high ACE year, ACE is accumulated cyclone energy, we didn't have Alex until right now in 2004. I was on my way to the Outer Banks with a couple of my colleagues for Hurricane Alex in 2004, and then look what happened over the subsequent 6 weeks or so, ending with Jeanne and its landfall at the end of September of 2004 and everything in between. And then 2004 continued to stay busy well on into December, if memory serves. Even the infamous 2005, I remember around August 15th, my colleague Mike Watkins posted an image over on Storm 2K, the message board site, of a huge area of dust coming off Africa. And what happened 10 days later or so? Katrina formed in the northwest Bahamas, and the rest is history. So things can change very, very quickly, especially when you take into consideration that this is where we're going to be going over the next few weeks. Up and up and up on the climatological spectrum. That's there for a reason. And I think things are going to change, and they'll start to change rapidly. We will see that reflected in the modeling as we go forward. All right, so there's my setup, so to speak. What else we got? Well, this neat little map. I really like this. This is put together by one of our supporters over in Bermuda, Howard did this, and I love it because it's updated through, as you can see down here, let's highlight it, over here, pay attention down here, 2021. The old points of origin maps that I showed off the Hurricane Center site only go through 2015 for whatever reason. So Howard took it upon himself to give us an interactive version. So this is June. So if we go look at this and then extrapolate it out where we can look at it distributed from points of origins on a map, this is what we have. This is where we started over from 1851 to 2021. These are all the different systems that formed in the Eastern Pacific and in the Atlantic Basin. So this is June. Get rid of me here. There's June. The first 10 days, these are in 10-day chunks. There's June 11th through the 20th, and I'll just move through here, 21 through 30, July, mid-July, late July, which we just went through. And late July can be busy out here in the deep tropics, but this year it was not. And the Eastern Pacific can be very busy, which it was this year, despite the forecast of below normal activity out there. It doesn't mean it's not possible. It was just a little bit surprising. So here we are today, and let's back it out just a little bit. This is today, and this is where we are on this. We are still right here at the first part of August. Like I said, activity actually wanes just a little bit. It's almost like it takes a little bit of a rest over history before it really starts to ramp up. It takes a deep breath before that roller coaster goes up the hill. So the first 10 days of August, the Atlantic Basin can be pretty busy from the coast of Africa out here, just off of there, the Cabo Verde Islands and vicinity. A nice clustering here in the Eastern Caribbean. Plenty of activity in the Gulf can occur. Not much in the Central Caribbean. There's a reason behind that, which we'll explain another time. Western Caribbean can be busy, and then random areas out here in the subtropics. But the bottom line, it's not supposed to be hyperactive busy this time during the hurricane season, even during a hyperactive forecast season. Does that make sense? I hope so. The second third of August, it gets even busier, and by the last third of August, we're really close to the peak there, where you get a lot of expected activity out here in the deep tropics between Africa and the Lesser Antilles, a tremendous amount in the Southwest Atlantic, a lot up here even in the subtropics, and then plenty over here in the Western Caribbean and the Gulf. And need I remind you that that's where Ida came from, was the Western Caribbean, coming up on a year ago. Powerful, destructive, memorable, infamous Hurricane Ida. So really, really cool map here. This is available on our HurricaneTrack Insider site. I'm actually going to put a link on there today. I was test driving this last night. I really like it. Good job from Howard. 2 thumbs up. Appreciate that. So all of our HurricaneTrack Insider Patreon folks, check it out if you want. In fact, you can even zoom in on these, and you can mouse over the different pieces of spaghetti noodles, if you will. The dots tell you, Gaston, there's one in 2004. I was down there for that one. That came in near Bulls Bay in South Carolina. But anyway, pretty cool map, interactive map, as it were, and that gives you a visual representation of that climatology that I was referencing. All right, there we go. Still learning my new setup here. Got a new computer, too, by the way. A very powerful, high-end computer, and this is the first time I'm using it for this update, so here's hoping. All right, so on the Monday updates, what I like to do is just kind of peruse a lot of the different aspects of the hurricane season that I look at on a daily basis. That being said, too, let me interject this. Another part of sort of the issue with the perception that everything is slower than it should be is that expression, a watched pot never boils. I would say a watched basin never produces. And that is the case. We literally have satellite imagery 5 to 15 minutes in an hour, whatever you want. You've got Twitter, you've got Facebook, you've got people on different platforms from Instagram to TikTok to message boards like the Venerable Storm 2K that are posting stuff so often that it just seems like it takes a long time, where in the reality, in the background, everything appears to be moving along as it should. And this map is a great example of that. So in other words, while we're all kind of stewing over and anticipating where are all these hurricanes that we were told were coming, in the background, everything's getting ready. All the ingredients are starting to fall into place, and this is part of that. The Pacific, the La Nina is making a comeback, and I'm going to show you a graphic in just a moment that really illustrates that. So this has not changed. We'll put a check mark here. Still very favorable. In recent days, the main development region off the coast of Africa over here has warmed anomalously, in other words, above the long-term average. That's also a positive. The subtropics up here, cooler than average. So you're going to focus the upward motion down here in the deep tropics when it's time. The Canary Current is, cooled a little bit in recent weeks, but it has been warming again recently. And then the water south of Iceland and Greenland, these anomalies are on the positive side. And this is a strong correlation from Dr. Klotzbach, Phil Klotzbach, out at Colorado State University, who does a lot of work in this field. And this is a fairly positive correlation. It's strong. It's not weak. It's not like, it might be a little correlation. Believe me, it is in the wheelhouse of showing an active season ahead. I think that his forecast that will come out on August 4th, it's an update, as NOAA will also have one, National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration. I believe they'll trim off what we didn't have in July. We had nothing in July to speak of. Colin, yeah, again, it's a named storm, but I regard that as not part of the overall background state. And so I believe that they might trim off a named storm or two, maybe one major hurricane and maybe one hurricane total, whatever. Still on pace for a very busy period, August, September, and October. And just, again, remember 2004, how busy that 6-week time frame was. If you don't think that we can squeeze a lot of activity into a short amount of time, just go back and watch one of our documentaries, Tracking the Hurricanes, 2004. It's readily available right on YouTube. All you got to do is search for it, and you'll see it's all there. Every one of them, from Alex all the way to Gene. And 2004 wasn't that dissimilar from what we're seeing this year in terms of Atlantic anomalies. It's not like it's a major disconnect. So, it can still happen. And I just want to make sure people are aware of that they're not writing off the season or they haven't forgotten about it, while also being careful not to hype something that isn't going to happen. I don't know for sure. There could be, it's mathematically possible that there could be no hurricanes this year. It is a non-zero chance. But the overwhelming odds are that's not going to happen. Once we get to the climatological ramping up, I think things will definitely change, and we had darn well better be ready, especially when you see these anomalies down here. Those are fairly substantial. We're talking more than a half a degree, and in some cases a degree Celsius above the long-term average. And when you spread that out over such a large area of an ocean basin, that's a lot more energy that's available, a lot more low-level moisture that will be there once the rest of the atmosphere cooperates. And I'll talk about what the holdup is in just a moment. So that's all in place. Gulf of Mexico is still warmer than average. Northwest Atlantic, as we have seen since about 2015, continues to be ridiculously above the long-term average. And that will help to foster a big area of high pressure over the Northwest Atlantic and the northeast part of North America, the continent. And that big high will set up, lowering the pressures south of it, what we call down below. And that's the setup for a steering pattern that would allow whatever to develops to come pretty far west more often than not. So there's a lot of ingredients here, including the La Nina out here. There was some warming in the last few weeks, but the strong trades that were just roaring, let's use red here, the trades were roaring across the deep tropics out here in the Pacific recently, and those strong trade winds, they were well above the long-term average, have pushed a lot of water out of the way, so to speak, and allowed a lot of water to start to upwell from below. Literally, if you took a cup of coffee that was hot and you blew across the top of it to cool it off, part of it is the evaporation and the agitation, but the other part is you help to bring up a little bit cooler. Well, maybe that's not the best analogy because a cup of coffee is always darn hot, but it works in the Pacific. That analogy busted, but you get the idea. Also, yes, the strong trades blowing across the Pacific literally help to cool it off, just like the analogy that I was trying to do there about the coffee. So that upwelling, I'll show you that in just a moment. The opposite has been happening in the Atlantic, by the way. The trades have all but reversed, and we've had southwesterly flow out here, and that has allowed the main development region to warm up off the coast of Africa. So this is the graphic, the animation. Look at this. From July until recently, early July until now, this goes back through May. There's June. We saw some warming. It was like, maybe the subsurface here is going to trigger a bust in the seasonal forecast because there was a lot of warming that was going on. People were thinking, well, maybe the La Nina is going to fail. Nope. The strong trades came in. This is the surface up here at the top. And those came in very, very strong throughout the month of July, especially the last couple of weeks. And that has allowed this very pronounced area of cold, deep water to upwell, pushing up from down below towards the surface. And that will eventually reach the surface, and you'll see it manifest itself out in this area in the coming days and just next couple of weeks. And what happens in the next couple of weeks? Playing along here, remember? The ramp up to the peak of the hurricane season, coinciding with a resurgence of the La Nina, taking whatever heat content is sitting out here out. This will all start to fade off and become blue again right as the Atlantic becomes more favorable. That is a coincidence there, a coincidence in that situation that is going to allow, I think, for fairly prolific development. I'm trying to get my cursor back. There we go. As we get towards the peak time. So you see what I mean? You got to just look at the evidence, and the evidence is pointing to a very busy time here as we go forward because of what has happened in the month of July while things have been so quiet in the Atlantic. Next, actual sea surface temperatures. This is very, very important. The Gulf, 30 degrees Celsius all through here. We're talking mid to upper 80s in some cases. Had a little wild, I don't know what happened there. That's all right. 31 Celsius over here. The Gulf is plenty warm, no doubt about it. It usually is, but it's exceedingly so this year. We go look at the anomalies map. Most of the Gulf here still above normal in the northern part. There's just a little area from upwelling from strong southerly winds coming across the Yucatan down there that has cooled things off just slightly in the southern Gulf. But the rest of it, very, very warm, 30, 31 Celsius, all the way up to the coast. We get a hurricane tracking through, or even a tropical storm that's trying to intensify. You got a lot of moisture, a lot of energy, the potential for very heavy rainfall at the very least. And at the other end of the spectrum, the potential for intense hurricanes in the Atlantic and the Gulf of Mexico there. So the western Atlantic basin over here, mid-Atlantic, etc., there you go, nice and warm. 27, 28, 29 Celsius, especially out in the Gulf Stream here. Even the 26 Celsius line right here, that's this yellow area, reaching a little bit more to the north now, a little bit farther north, within just a couple hundred miles of Long Island and New England. So just speculating, if you had a hurricane running up the coast like this, it wouldn't have a large area of cooler water before it started to weaken. These are the things that we watch, or at least what I watch, and they are all increasing. Everything is still on the way up, including, and I'm going to remind you of this, where'd it go? This guy right here. All of this is happening while we start to begin this ramp up over here, and that is still almost 3 weeks away, around August 20th. Wow. All right, this is a great meme from the ever awesome, and this is what the thing says. This is Storm Chaser Nick. Weather jokes, weather memes, photoshops, gifs, and sarcastic from Cincinnati, Ohio. This is great. And you got to read into that. That's fantastic. That Tom Hanks shot there from Castaway. No new tropical cyclones are expected during the next 5 days, and he's like been waiting forever. We get it. I've already covered all that. I just thought I would end and give this a little bit of a showcase there from Storm Chaser Nick. Very, very funny. And look, at least we can laugh now because this is a very serious thing. I think we can all agree to that once the hurricanes come, or tropical storms, and that, for what it's worth, we have to pay attention. We have to be ready. All jokes aside, it is a very, very serious thing. All right, so current events. Well, out in the Pacific, there's Frank dying off. Georgette already dead out here somewhere. A couple other areas trying to develop. It is interesting. I will admit I am surprised at how much activity has flourished in the Pacific this year. But, and I talked about this a little bit in my morning update today, I want to point out, and I think this is very relevant. All right, I'm not just looking for stuff to rationalize and, kind of hold on to the idea that we're going to have a very busy season. I mean, this is my business. This is what I do. And if there's no hurricanes, there's very little interest in what I do. I get that. But you also have to be objective. And we can go and look at these, and with the exception of a couple of them, I think Darby was pretty powerful, but we haven't had, to my point here, I'll get to it, we have not had Category 4 and 5 hurricanes one after the other out in the Pacific, just spitting out one intense hurricane right after the other, and they're just going and going and going for days on end. They've just been these kind of garden variety, normal, couple of twos. Darby was pretty strong, I think, at one point. But that's it. No earth-shattering, news-making, just like crazy. All they've headed up into Mexico, 3 landfalls, just like an El Nino season would give us, typically. These have just found a sweet spot to give us your average, normal kind of hurricanes in the eastern Pacific, and this is going to shut down in the next couple of weeks. I'm almost certain of it. It makes sense. The Pacific will calm. You'll still get 1 or 2 out there, but then the Atlantic is going to take over. That is naturally usually what happens in this kind of a pattern. But I just wanted to remind you of that look, that's my observation, and I think you can see it as well as I can. These last few weeks, the month of July, we've had a lot of activity out there. What is it, 8 all the way to Georgette? I think that's 8. But none of them have been remarkably intense. I think Darby was quite aesthetic to look at. A beautiful eye, pretty strong. It was surviving in marginal conditions. But I think that also goes to show you, look at what we've had in the Pacific with marginal, not particularly favorable, and wait until the Atlantic takes over. It's going to go gangbusters. I think that's another clue as well. All right, in the Atlantic, speaking of the Atlantic, yes, lots of dry, stable air out here. I don't know why there's only 2 frames, whatever. Still proves my point. And you can see this stratocumulus deck out here, that milky color. Dry, stable atmosphere, intertropical convergent zone, somewhat non-existent. It is trying to percolate a little bit. We just got a big old area of high pressure sitting out here. The dust and the dry air gets ejected off of Africa, makes its way across, and puts a literal lid on things. But again, look at the date. It's August 1st. That is typical. It is typical. Even in the mid part of August, we can still have these dust outbreaks. But that certainly didn't stop Ida last year, which was over here. And, a lot of people live down here in southeast Louisiana where Ida impacted. They couldn't give 2 you-know-whats about African dust out here if it were occurring at the time. I don't even remember. All I remember is how devastating Ida was, and the dust had nothing to do with stopping Ida. So just keep that in mind as well. All right, so this is a neat perspective. I really like this. The total precipitable water chart and product here from the University of Wisconsin, at least all those frames loaded. It's still pretty dry out there, but this is interesting. Look at this big old area of tumbling going on right there. You can see it as well as I can. A tropical wave, high amplitude, lots of energy there, rolling off of Africa, quite literally. The one thing that is missing, or the one thing I think another way to look at it, the one thing that's keeping this down is the dry, stable air. You remove that, and it is all, it's on. It's game on for all of this stuff to develop. All of these tropical waves that have been coming across, they have been limited almost exclusively by dry air, some stronger upper-level winds from time to time. But that's another thing that will gradually change as we get towards the latter part of August. The westerly winds down in the deep tropics will start to relent, and we will develop these areas of upper-level high pressure, providing these umbrellas for these systems to get under, and then they will blossom. So that's interesting, though. A lot of energy there for sure. And you know what? It doesn't just go away. This thing will track, and that's a huge piece of energy, across the Atlantic, and it's going to end up somewhere over here. It could come south and end up in the Pacific. That wouldn't shock me either. But it's at a pretty high latitude. So, in a week, it's going to be sitting over here somewhere. And then what's it going to do? It'll be a week later, a week closer towards the climatological ramping up. So we have to start watching these more and more, not just because of where they are, but to where they're going, for sure. All right, switching gears just a little bit. As you know, I am not just about hurricanes. That certainly is my forte, and that's what my business is based around, the whole brand HurricaneTrack. But I'm a weather geek at heart, which most of you that watch these videos are as well. And as such, a lot has been happening across the lower 48 in recent weeks. We know about the terrible floods in Kentucky and Missouri, the death toll in Kentucky, unacceptable. Even one person is unacceptable. We're talking getting close to 36 deaths, unfortunately. Every bit of that is from rainfall and flooding. So let us not forget, and let that be a reminder, that even a weak tropical storm, and those weren't tropical storms, I don't want to misconstrue what's going on here, but it was tropical moisture and the positioning of this big old high that's just been sitting out over the western Atlantic and the southeast, and you've had all of this moisture riding over the top of it, and these large clusters of thunderstorms wringing out that moisture in torrential downpours, slow-moving thunderstorms. You can get slow-moving tropical systems, a dead hurricane like Harvey in 2017. We all remember that. So this is a good reminder that flooding is an impact, and a very dangerous one at that. But also, as we go to out west, a few areas here in Colorado, New Mexico, Utah, and a lot in Nevada and even California, those greens are flash flood watches because of the southwest monsoon, or more accurately, the North American monsoon. A wonderful thing it is to get the moisture to come up into the southwest and provide rain where it is desperately needed. I spent a week out there with our good friend and supporter and colleague of mine, Matt Clemens from Denver. Driving all over Arizona, we learned a whole bunch about just how important the water is out there. And I know it sounds obvious, that I'm stating the obvious, but seeing it firsthand, the big population areas, Phoenix, Tucson, Las Vegas, and Utah, with what they're dealing with, especially with the Great Salt Lake and the diversion, people diverting water from these lakes, and using it for agricultural. That's the main use of water, plus pools, sprinklers, toilets, faucets, showers, whatever. All the people that live out there, water is a very, very valuable resource. And so people really appreciate it when it comes. But sometimes too much of it in a short period of time can be problematic. So let me get rid of this, and we're going to come back to this map in just a moment. And I want to show you off my desktop here a couple of videos. This is yesterday from a camera that we have in Pahrump, Nevada, outside of Vegas. Watch right there. That's a wet microburst. It's not the highest of resolution, but look at that. That's a heavy, heavy rain shaft. Here it is close up. A wet microburst. It looks like an explosion on the ground, and that's exactly what it is. All of that cold, rain-cooled air sinks, falls down with the microburst, and then watch what happens. A huge area of strong wind comes roaring at the camera. This is at our friend Paul's house. There comes the dust. It took a little while. It's pretty far away. And you get a big old dust storm. That's the outflow from that wet microburst. And then a ton of rain came in, and they had flooding and roads closed. I saw one of the national parks out there. I think the Mojave National Park was rolled up. Hold on, let me pause this. Hopefully. Come on, stop. And let's get me back if I can. Go over here. Go to this. There we go. Show this in a minute. Part of the Mojave National Park closed because of flooding, and as this started to play before I was ready, it is impactful. But it's really interesting because on one hand, it's so desperately needed by the ecosystems out there. Nature needs the rain, as well as mankind and all of the needs that we have. People vacation out there. They retire to Scottsdale, to Tempe, to Phoenix, to Vegas, to St. George, Utah, to Salt Lake City, and many, many points in between. The Navajo Nation out there and the other Native American tribes, they rely on it. We traveled through a lot of those areas, really, really grasping the importance of water in the desert Southwest and the Southwest just as a whole. Not all of it's desert, but it can be impactful. And let's go to this video. What do they say on TV? Roll the clip, please, or whatever. Roll tape. It's not tape anymore. It's all digital zeros and ones, right? So let's get rid of me. Come on, there we go. So this is Apache Junction last Thursday. It was my last day out there. Torrential. And I mean, it was like a tropical storm. The wind was up. I was in my own wet microburst that had occurred where I was, right there at Apache Junction. Water roaring across the road there. Quite impressive to see. They picked up a lot of rain, but it was too much, and the infrastructure couldn't handle it. You know, if there was no people out there, you know, the animals, yes, they can be impacted, but yeah, it's when people get impacted that we start to complain about it, and it becomes a problem. But it's needed. This is an aerial view. I'm telling you, the use of drone technology to really understand stuff. As dramatic as this is, by the way, there's actually a lot of science understanding why this particular feature is there. I'm going to be talking with one of our good friends and our wave specialist, Dr. Ryan Maris at UNC Wilmington, coastal engineer. There's a lot going on here that I want to try to unpack and understand beyond just the wow factor of this video that I captured on the last hours of my last day out there. I smile because I had put Matt on a plane. He had to get back home to Denver, and I still had several hours until my flight left, and he missed this and wasn't very happy about it. We had traveled 4,600 miles, saw a few things similar to this, but nothing this dramatic. And then I go out there 40 miles or so east of Phoenix and hit the jackpot, so to speak, with this amazing display of how the water can affect, on the positive side, you needed it, and on the negative side, that there are impacts from these systems in the desert Southwest. So there you go. How about today, just to kind of wrap this up? Unfortunately, more flood watches too. Don't want to ignore this. In Kentucky, parts of West Virginia, that's the last thing they need. Heat advisories here in the nation's midsection. Fire danger up here in the northwest part of our country. And then Nevada and parts of California. Boy, if you could get some over here near that fire. A couple people have perished there, unfortunately. I mean, we need an El Nino and some tropical systems to come up into the southwest and bring a lot of moisture, but that's a story for another day. But it is still pretty active out there with the southwest monsoon, so the North American monsoon, technically. So just be aware of that. All right? All right, now I can sign out. Told you this was going to be lengthy. That's the good thing about this format. I can do the short update in the morning and kind of put a quick spin on everything, so to speak. Not spin, that's the wrong word. Well, it might be the right word because our tropical systems do spin, but you know what I'm saying. I try to be objective about it and not overdo things. But the morning update is good because I can give you a quick look at what's happening. And then when we need to talk about it further, that's what we have the Hurricane Outlook and Discussion for. Now, I do hope that you will subscribe to our YouTube channel. A lot of good people go in to help make this work. They volunteer their time to help me. They like to be involved. We do that through our Patreon at patreon.com/HurricaneTrack. Or you can download the Patreon app and search HurricaneTrack. We have Discord. We have our live cameras, a whole bunch of them, the interactive tracking maps, and just a great community. Still over 600 strong if you want to be a part of it. The link to join is in the description of today's video. But, you know, still, YouTube, absolutely free. Check that out there. Subscribe onto the channel. Set the notification bell to be notified, when I post a video. Otherwise, you'll be like, when is Mark posting a new video? You'll know, but you got to hit that bell. Punch it hard and punch it often, or whatever. I'm trying here. All right, let me get back to signing off before I just ramble on and don't know where I am, get down a rabbit hole. We are at the beginning of August, and, you know, we know where we're going from here. What happens between now and the end of the month, nobody knows for sure. I get that. But we will be ready. Like I said, I've got a great team helping out in the background. We have a tremendous amount of equipment ready to go for when the hurricanes do decide to show up and cross our shorelines. We will be there to cover that to the best of our ability. So that being said, I appreciate you being on your side of the screen to tune in and give me a listen and a watch. I appreciate it more than you know. Have a great rest of your week. As always, thanks for tuning in. I'm Mark Studdeth for Hurricane Track. I'll be back with more for you tomorrow morning.